You know what? Let's just go right into the first question. And I like how you, when you're describing yourself, you brought up one of the main factors that I myself, as a fan, always want to know is how much do these fighters get paid? And if I can just bring up UFC 229 as an example, and we know that Khabib and Conor both made, well, Conor made 3 million and Khabib made 2 million, and that's just what the UFC was going to pay them. And I know that the next fight, which was the co-main event, Tony versus Anthony Pettis, those guys made significantly less amount of money. So can you please break down how fighters get paid and how much money they get paid allocated to them?
All right, well, what we do know in the big picture is in 2015, UFC paid roughly 13% of revenue to fighters. That was roughly $80 million in 2015. In 2016, they paid 17% of revenue, and that was the first year that WME was involved. But I'm not crediting WME with raising fighter salary. A large part of that was due to Conor and Ronda fighting so much and getting pay-per-view points. And 17% in 2016 is roughly $120 million.
Wow.
Now, you just said, whoa, on 120 million. That shows in 2016 how you cannot go by AC reports as far as pay goes. What AC reports are what the AC puts in escrow. So Nevada State Athletic Commission for 229,
Yeah.
and what they can find a fighter with, and what that fighter has to get paid. There are a lot of different ways fighters get paid. A fighter can get paid by signing bonuses. If you remember, like 3 years ago, Nate Diaz was getting 2020, which was less than he was getting 2 years prior to that. That was because Nate Diaz signed to UFC again. He did another contract where he got signed with a big signing bonus because he supposedly owed the government taxes.
Okay.
So if you're, and I don't know the amount he was given up front, but if you're given 200,000 up front, and that's just a number I'm saying, I'm not saying Nate Diaz got that, because I'll get Nate Diaz smacking me in the pocket.
Yeah, you don't want Nate Diaz on your door.
Okay, so let's get Nate Diaz out of it. Let's say fighter X, who I can take in a fight. Let's say he's a man.
Yeah. A little man that you can take.
Given
I want to see that
signing bonus. He might get $20,000 a fight now. As far as AC reports go, you see that all the time with Bellator. When a fighter leaves UFC for Bellator, UFC has the right contractually to match what Bellator is offering and keep that fighter. If the fighter doesn't want to go back to UFC with the matching offer, they have to sit out a year. We haven't seen that. So you take a fighter like Henderson, Benson Henderson.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll see his athletic commission pay for less than what he made from UFC, and people going, "Oh, see, Bellator doesn't pay more." No, that's what he's getting paid per fight according to the athletic commission. You don't know what he got paid as a signing bonus. You don't know if he's getting paid appearance fees, which could be for the press leading up to it. So AC reports, you really can't judge by that. Because, like I said, in 2016, UFC paid $120 million. And how much Tony Ferguson got, Tony Ferguson's deal, made no sense because he only got $5,000 win bonus. So you don't know. Now, did he get pay-per-view points? I severely doubt that.
Right.
But you don't know what he wound up with. He could have got an upfront fee to sign. There's so many different ways that fighters get paid these days. It's tough. It's tough to grasp. I mean, there's no chance Khabib made $2 million.
And so you said you gave that number in 2016. Do we know what the value, how much are fighters getting paid in percentage, and the full amount in, let's say, 2017?
Glad you asked that. 2017 is skewed because of a little known fight called Maypac.
Yeah.
Maypac. In the books for 2017, it includes the money UFC got and the money UFC paid Conor. So that's going to throw everything out the window because that's such an anomaly. So you can't count that as MMA. You can't count that really. The big test will be about 6 months, about a year from now, and when we can judge 2018. Also 2018 will be interesting because that'll be the last year before the Fox deal came into effect. So roughly what we know is UFC in the past years that we know pay roughly 13 to 17%. of their total revenue. That's not profit. Their profit they pay about a third of. Now, is that good? No. They can certainly pay more. They can certainly pay a lot more, especially for the damage that these fighters take. So
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's something fighters and their management have to work out.
To compensate for that value.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. They don't seem to want to form a union. And if you want to get in on that briefly, I can give you my opinion on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get because unions have been formed previously. I know just last year or even 2 years ago we had that union, the fighters union, that involved Cain Velasquez, Donald Cerrone, TJ Dillashaw, and there was a bunch of buzz in the beginning, and it kind of, well, they all kind of fizzle out. And so does that, how much legitimacy do these unions have? We keep seeing them come up.
Right now, none of them have any legitimacy.
Exactly.
None of them are a union. I can get into things that I've heard personally. A lot of people didn't. They thought the Bajon Rebney led union, which is the one that had GSP, Kane, Quinta, TJ Dillashaw,
yep,
and Cerrone behind it. A lot of people felt that once they read it more into that. Now this is them talking, not me. That they felt Bjorn was more spiteful towards UFC than being pro fighter.
Gotcha.
With Leslie Smith, she was always the one that seemed level-headed. Leslie Smith could not get 30% of contracted UFC fighters to sign an anonymous card to look into whether or not fighters are independent contractors or not. If you can't get 30% to sign a card to look into the possibility of a union,
there's no hope.
Union. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is, like the percentage you'd have to get to, if you get that far to vote a union. If it's
right.
51 or if it's higher, like 75 or something. I apologize, I don't know that because I'm not a union guy. But
it's got to be higher than 30%.
Well, yeah, and they're not even getting 30%. Now people can say it's because they don't like Leslie Smith, they like Leslie Smith, or they're afraid. Whatever the reason is, they're not getting the support. You still should want to get the most information possible. You can still vote no for a union and vote her out of office down the road. I think the big reason that UFC fighters are having trouble unionizing is because most fighters are not US based, and they're from countries where unions are not as known and they're not as respected, and they don't want what they would consider somebody else into their business, if you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to stay politically correct on this. I don't want to.
Hey, don't worry. No, you won't get me in trouble. I need the openness. I need the honesty from people like you. So
Brazil might not want some American bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Knowing his business,
and that's just facts, and that's just the facts, and that's the hard truth that a lot of people can't accept. And that's probably one of the reasons that's preventing this union to really come into fruition. Right. And so, like you said, it's only going to harm the fighters in the respect that we're talking about, financially, right? And it's dampening the progress of really legitimizing this sport in comparison to all these greater sports. But Frankie, I want to kind of come back into the whole topic of the financial aspect of the UFC. And one thing I really want to ask you is, because you made that little segue as WME purchased UFC, and that was arguably the biggest piece of MMA news we have ever gone in terms of the back end, in terms of the financials. And so I need to ask you this, Frankie, as this will segue into a bunch of other questions. Why did WME purchase UFC, and what was the true business objective with this company?
When WMME, well, first off, WME is not the only owner of UFC. They have a lot of financial backers behind them that are worth a lot more money than WME are. What happened was WME, they were UFC's agents with their TV negotiations with Fox. So they had an insight to UFC to see how much money UFC can make, and also in their position in Hollywood of making deals, they saw in advance how big content distribution would be.
Right.
I don't think anybody in WME, meaning Ari and Patrick, the two big guys, bought UFC because they're MMA fans. They might be, but I don't see them even at the fights. Conor McGregor said he talked to Ari once, and that was at MSG. I didn't see any pictures of Ari at UFC 229, and that's their biggest fight. So
Yep.
I'm going to roll the dice here and say that they're not big MMA fans. They're fans of money. They get paid $25 million a year to run UFC before they get their percentage of the profit, which
It's not a bad payday.
which as of a year ago they owned less than 50%. I don't know if that's changed since then because
Right.
they did buy out some smaller partners. So they looked at UFC as content distribution, and it was smart. They paid 4.2 million for UFC.
Right.
By the time they paid off some loans that the Fertittas had.
Yep. Oh, so they paid off the Fertitta brothers' loans they had outstanding.
UFC they paid. This way it gets confusing. They paid a total of about 3.8 or $9 million for UFC, but to get the deal, they had to pay off another 200 million in loans. So
Wow,
that brought it
okay.
up to like 4.2 million. And then since that point, they have also paid bonuses because UFC hit financial goals. So
Okay.
overall, they probably paid closer to 4.5 million when everything's said and done.
Okay.
I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but they did that because they saw content distribution was how to make money. And it's the truth. And that's something Bellator, because I just don't want to make this just about UFC. Bellator realized as well at Viacom by the deal they made with DAZN. So
Yep.
WMA is in this strictly because UFC was content they knew they'd be able to sell. Sports content is very big now because it's content that is considered DVR proof. You
Okay.
take a show like This Is Us on NBC.
Yep.
I would say half the people don't watch that live. They probably watch it 2 or 3 days later. You can't really do that with sports because you find out who hit a home run,
Yeah.
who had a TKO. If you knew that Conor McGregor lost in the 4th round, you're not going to be as excited about watching it on Monday.
Not even close.
So companies are paying a lot of money for that, and they were smart enough to jump into it. Do I think Ari knows more than 5% of the roster by name? Probably not.
And that's just the business end of it. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it
Absolutely
because,
not.
like you said, they're not MMA fans. They're business minds. They're people who would like, investing $1 and getting $10 out, ideally, right? These are guys who know the numbers, know how to model and massage their money to get more out of it.
They took UFC in a downturn in interest, a downtime in interest, and I don't mean financial interest. I mean people caring about MMA, and they
Yep.
made more money with it. That's why they purchased UFC. One thing about Lorenzo and his brother Frank, they spent money. They didn't spend it on the fighters, but they would take private planes everywhere. They hired guys like Chuck and Matt to Matt
Yeah.
Hughes to basically no-show jobs, if you want to use an old mafia saying.
Yeah.
And Fertittas do end in a vowel, so they know all about that. WMA saw a way that they can cut. They cut about $50 to $65 million off the budget.
Wow.
So right off that means it made them a hell of a lot more comfortable. UFC now is less reliant on pay-per-view than they ever were.
And I think that's actually where we're gonna go with this. And stream, like we talked about this earlier, Frankie. Pay-per-views were the older model for UFC and for
Right.
many, WWE as well, right?
Yeah.
Pay-per-view is the way they really made their income. It was a great event. They, $60, $60 standard, 65 HT, whatever it may be. But now I want to ask you, with the recent deals with ESPN for UFC and DAZN with Bellator, which in my opinion I think is a great service. I actually am. I am a subscriber for DAZN, and I'm completely happy with it. I'm gonna watch the Bellator fights on it today. Now I need to ask you, with these recent TV deals, how does UFC and Bellator look in the future, kind of making that transition to modern age streaming?
Well, with Bellator, the DAZN deal saved them. John Nash said that Bellator grossed a total of about 20 million in 2017. Grossed 20
That's
million.
not good.
That is less than 1/35 of what UFC grossed.
Wow.
That's 1/6
Wow.
of what UFC paid fighters.
Wow, that's
Right. So
and that's in 2017, you said?
2017. So they
Jeez.
lost money in
Yeah.
2017. DAZN is paying them 100 million guaranteed for 3 years with an option for 2 more. So that's $33.3 million a year. They're getting paid more from DAZN than they made in 2017.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant deal to do that. Now, Viacom, if you think about it, Viacom is their own content distributor. So for them to take this deal, that shows you that streaming services are really going after, content like UFC and content like Bellator. So I am thrilled that DAZN. I mean, I thought their broadcast was great. The initial Bellator.
Yeah,
I thought it was fabulous, and I had a few streaming issues with it, but that was probably their most popular, month because they did the 3 month and they had the boxing fight prior to it. So I'm not worried about that. So as far as UFC with ESPN Plus, ESPN is paying UFC roughly $10 million per event.
Per event.
They're never going to make that money back on ESPN Plus. They're doing it as a loss leader because they want to brand ESPN Plus. Now, I don't know what your next question is, but I get this all the time. How are all these streaming services going to survive 5 to 10 years down the road?
And that was my next question. Thank you for reading my mind, Frankie.
There you go. They're not. They're not all.
They're not.
What's going to happen is they'll consolidate into a few big ones. Whether Netflix buys out DAZN, which isn't me breaking news, I'm just making up stuff. You don't know where it's going to go. Sirius bought XM because you couldn't afford 2 satellite radios. It just made no sense. So I think eventually, 5 years from now, we'll start seeing consolidation of the streaming services where you're not going to have to sign up for 7 different streaming services to get everything you want.
Yeah, and and there's bigger names too. Like Amazon is making a streaming service as well, right? And they have some phenomenal TV shows to their respect. And like you said, there's Netflix. And then how can we afford so many subscriptions? It's $10.99 a month for Netflix. I got my DAZN membership. Right. I'm gonna sign up for Amazon. My bill is gonna come up to $50-$60 a month just to watch all these different TV shows.
You're going to eventually wind up paying more than you do for cable now. Which
is
the exact opposite point of why all these things have wanted to happen.
Comes full circle.
Yeah, so eventually it will be consolidated. Who will be the, who and why and where it'll be 5-10 years from now, who knows? But it has to, because ESPN is not going to make that money back on the deal they have with UFC. It's impossible, not at $5 a head.
So, Frankie, we're not talking about streaming, and we know that the power of streaming right now. We know that, DAZN saved Bellator with their streaming services. I need to ask you, how can streams be translated to make UFC and Bellator money? As a person who's not as savvy in the financial side, it makes sense to me when you buy a pay-per-view, the UFC makes money. I paid $65. You take my $65. I get it. Wherever that $65 gets divided and split up, I don't really care. I just know that money's in the UFC's pocket and whatever broadcaster that they partner with. But how does streaming necessarily translate into making money for organizations like UFC and Bellator?
Well, it's guaranteed money. They don't have to worry about how ESPN is going to do anything. ESPN signed for $150 million $300 million altogether with ESPN. But if you just take, let's take the DAZN deal because that'll be easier. So because it's not two deals. DAZN is paying $33 million to Bellator. Bellator knows they have $33 million. That's what matters to Bellator.
Guaranteed.
Right. They are going to give DAZN the content they agreed to. If they decide to change the deal midway through, that means something good is happening. But Bellator knows they got $100 million coming to them in the next 3 years, which is something that was far from a guarantee before that. So it's UFC and Bellator have the guaranteed money coming to them, unless these companies go out of business, which ESPN isn't, and DAZN has a lot of big financial European backing.
It's a great look for both companies. I think ESPN, the transition from Fox to ESPN, it gives it that legitimacy in the sporting world. Everyone knows ESPN's power in the sports industry, and now with Bellator kind of rivaling that partnership with UFC and ESPN with DAZN, I think it's just a great look for each organization. Well, I truly, as a fan, I'm extremely happy.
Well, here is a big part of the ESPN deal that's great for UFC that a lot of people don't touch on. They now have a partner in ESPN. ESPN is going to cover UFC a lot more. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
big. We saw that the week leading up to the McGregor Khabib fight. They sell the pay-per-view on ESPN Plus as well. So that's part of the pay-per-view, the internet pay-per-view portion of it, which is now 20% and getting higher. 3 years ago, it was 5%, meaning 5% of the people who bought pay-per-view did it online. Now it's 20%. Next year, it might be 25%. So ESPN is will be promoting pay-per-views, even the smaller pay-per-views, more than they would have before, because they have a financial stake into it, because they want UFC to be bigger, and they want to get more of a percentage of that pay-per-view being sold. That's also going to help Bellator, because if ESPN wants to be considered legitimate, they're going to have to cover more of MMA, and that's going to trickle down into Bellator as well. So Bellator's being helped by the UFC ESPN deal as well.
And we see that, I'm sure you're familiar with Ariel Helwani and how he made that transition, I should say, from MMA Junkie to now ESPN. He co-hosts with Chael Sonnen. He's doing a lot more deals.
And who does Chael fight for?
Bellator, exactly. So, the proof is in the pudding, as I say. This ESPN deal is not just a UFC booster; it's an MMA booster globally, and for the whole picture of mixed martial arts going forward.
Absolutely. And while people could say it's not fair, Bellator, whatever, they'd be idiots not to capitalize on this.
Exactly. And I think I have enough faith in Scott Coker that he knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy. I think his team behind him, I think they can really point Bellator in the right direction.
Well, here's the thing. Scott Coker is an MMA guy. He did an interview about 2 weeks ago, and if you want it, I'll send it to you, with Dave Meltzer, and this was at the Rory Musashi fight.
Yeah.
It was 45 minutes of two huge MMA fans just talking MMA. It really made Scott Coker stick out. He didn't sound like a promoter. Scott Coker could play the promotion game as good or as bad as Dana White. In this instance, I never heard Dana White just sound like an MMA hardcore fan. Coker wasn't throwing out promotional bullshit lines. He was just talking with another MMA fan about MMA, about the history of Hawaiian MMA, about fights that happened 20 years ago in Japan.
Yeah.
It was really great to see somebody who cared about MMA. Where Scott Coker fails is the business end of it. If Viacom was smart enough to take a lot of their programming off of Paramount Network, because ratings are down this year. I don't know if you know this, 25% already from 2017 on Paramount.
And that's just for Paramount?
That's just for Paramount, for Bellator.
All right. Yep.
When they made the move to Paramount, they lost 25% of their audience. Viacom, there was a lot of rumors that Bellator was going to get downgraded to CMT. Because if you remember, at the beginning of the year, they were doing simulcast on both networks.
Yep. Yes, I do.
And there was no reason to do that unless they were testing out CMT. The fact that Viacom is taking programming away from themselves and giving it to DAZN shows that they understand the future of this business and to get that money. So it's making it seem like Viacom is all in now. Also, what Bellator and Coker are doing, which is brilliant, is they're looking at markets that UFC isn't as big in, and they're going after those markets. They're stopped trying to think they can do pay-per-view in the United States to catch up to UFC. It's not going to happen. WWE in America is not going to get caught up to by Ring of Honor. Bellator is not going to catch UFC. People in the States, they think MMA is UFC. How many people do you train UFC? You know that inside joke.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So hey man, Bellator, you do UFC? You play UFC?
Bellator. They're trying to build in markets that UFC doesn't have a stranglehold on, and it's brilliant on their end. So it looks like Viacom is now all in. So it's actually the next 3 to 5 years are going to be very exciting if you're an MMA fan.
Oh yeah, and I think even today on Scott Coker, he was talking about it was yesterday for the Bellator 207 press conference. He was talking about how they have future plans to do more shows in Europe. Yeah. And when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, the UFC doesn't do enough of those.
Right.
Not and so for Bellator to capitalize on that, I think it's exactly what you're saying. They're targeting markets and maybe even niches that the UFC kind of overlooked or chose to put their resources in a different market or audience as a
I lost
whole.
you. I lost you for a moment. After you said put there, I didn't hear you.
Oh, so I just said that the UFC was putting their resources in separate niches and target and markets that now Bellator is capitalizing.
Right.
And that's,
Oh,
yeah.
it's brilliant. And if you just look at UK, because that's where Bellator is really going all out. I don't
Right.
know if you noticed, but in 2019, UFC is no longer going to be on BT Sports.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, they're going to be on a streaming service. I might get the name wrong on this one, so I didn't expect to talk about this. I believe
Yep.
it's called 11. Now, 11 is a streaming service. Guess who owns 11?
Who?
Guess. Take a wild guess. Don't look it up.
ESPN.
No, WMME.
Ah, there it
So,
is.
Right
There
off
it
the bat, so there's
is.
less exposure and a lot more money. Also, now that they're off BT Sports, guess what else UFC is going to be doing in the UK? They're going to be doing whatever they feel would be a big pay-per-view. So, because Conor McGregor, his fight with Floyd Mayweather, that did 1.1 million buys in the UK.
Yeah.
It blew
Oh,
past-
wow.
It blew past it blew past Floyd and Manny Pacquiao. So, the amount of money they're going to make on doing 1 or 2 pay-per-views a year is going to be ridiculous. They now see that the UK is willing to pay for a pay-per-view that's going to air in the morning with
Yep.
Conor McGregor on it. So Bellator is seeing that there's now an opening in the UK, because while UFC will make more money, they're going to have less exposure. So they're doing shows that are going to air in prime time in the UK, focusing on local UK fighters. And they have a UK office that just opened up. So that's where they're really playing it smart. Is that, they're making a mini Bellator in the United Kingdom.
Well, even Bellator's current roster, I mean, you have stars such as Paul Daly and MVP. You know, they're British fighters, they're UK fighters, they're people that the Bellator has recruited, and they recruit these smaller UK local fighters to build their brand there. And I think it's phenomenal. But I need to counter this argument. UFC 228, Frankie, what happened there? Darren Till, Liverpool star, hyped up to be the next fighter, and even though he may not perform against Tyron Woodley, well, that was already after the fact that people should have bought this pay-per-view. So what happened there? We know the numbers. They weren't anything. They were awful numbers.
About 130K. Well, first off, Darren Till being a UK star, which I think was always exaggerated, isn't going to mean anything to the pay-per-view buys, because UK didn't buy pay-per-views.
Right. So that kind of negates that effect,
Absolutely.
eh?
Yeah, and in the States, Dana's new star bombed, meaning Darren Till.
Yep.
He wasn't Dana White's new star. He was somebody who, if he beat Woodley, could have been somebody they could have kept building. People think that when UFC looks at a fighter and thinks that guy might be a star, that they have to sell 1 million pay-per-views off the bat. No, you can't predict who's going to be the next pay-per-view king. I mean, a year ago, did anybody think Khabib would be this big? I mean, MMA hardcores love the guy, but there wasn't a casual around sitting in the bar going, "Yeah, that guy that wrestles bears is going to sell 2 million pay-per-views."
Exactly. They can't even pronounce that name.
Yeah, the guy has like 12 million Instagram followers now. You can't predict what's going to happen. I would have never have thought that this fight would have done 2.4 million buys. Never. You can't predict these things, but you see a guy like Darren Till who's willing to promote and who's big in his country, you're going to push him into a title fight quicker than others.
Yep. And I think that was clear, even the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, I liked how Darren Till fought. I mean, it was a close decision. I don't want to get into that with you, I want to use you for your knowledge with the financials, but I exactly see what you're saying. It was a push and it was a rush, and he kind of butt the line of Kobe Covington, and again, whole topic for a different day, but as you said, it was a rush performance on Darren Till, and to kind of say that he should have translated to X amount of money, it's not fair to say to the fighter or to the business side.
Right, I think that's
UFC.
unrealistic. Now, should that fight have done 130K? No, I mean, the UFC over was roughly about 200,000 that they thought. So it did 33% lower than UFC
Yeah.
thought would be the over-under. And see, here's the thing about pay-per-view that a lot of people don't get. And you actually asked this question, when we first began about moving away from pay-per-view.
Yep.
Pay-per-view has turned into something where only big events are going to draw, because pay-per-view is not a singular purchase. Sports Business Journal did a study about 3 or 4 years ago, which said 4 to 6 people watch every UFC pay-per-view that's bought. Bigger fights do more, 6 to 8 people. Because people come over, they have events, they chip in $10 a piece, or the party host spends the $65, or on a big boxing fight, $100.
Whatever it may
and
be,
everybody else brings food and pizza.
Beer, whatever it may be.
You're not going to throw a party that's going to be successful for Amanda Nunes. It just not going to work. Hey, you want to give up your Saturday? You want to talk your girlfriend into, instead of having date night, coming over to my house and watch fights? Who's fighting? Darren Till.
Yep.
No thanks. Mighty Mouse. No thanks.
Yep.
Who's fighting? Conor McGregor. Is he fighting that Russian guy? Yeah, definitely.
There it is.
And that's where it is. So pay-per-view, while it's less popular, the bigger fights are bigger now because people aren't doing it every month.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things where the lesser fights are going to be less, the bigger fights are going to be bigger.
And I think, that completely deletes or erases the middle ground. And I think, honestly, with this streaming movement, this streaming capitalization, I think that's a good move. I think saving your pay-per-view slots, the 2 or 3 events where you have the Conor McGregor name, you have the return of Khabib, or whatever it may be in the future, I think you can get a bigger return. And the numbers prove it. Like you said, the numbers are definitely there. But Frankie, I want to ask you something, and this has been on my mind for so long, and we're kind of straying away from kind of the organizational point, and I want to kind of go back to the fighter pay, because I know when Bellator or even Strikeforce started, ever since the Reebok deal, there was a whole backlash from the fighters that now their sponsorship money has just went down the drain. Companies like Venom, all these different monsters, all these different companies got kind of screwed over for the fighter that are sponsoring. And we know the Reebok pay salary. Again, we can get into that if you want to segue to that. But I want to ask you, we know Bellator, one of their strong points is that fighters and their banners can have independent sponsors. They can have deals to the side that Bellator doesn't necessarily facilitate to pay them for their appearance and for their performances. What is the better approach to sponsors? Is it having one sponsor like the Reebok with UFC, or is it giving the fighters the freedom and the option to have their own sponsors and to maybe facilitate what the sponsor is? But I want to get your take on that.
Okay, well, just to be factually correct, UFC fighters can have more than the Reebok sponsor. They just can't have their logo and a banner fight week.
Okay.
So and most UFC fighters do, and they make a lot of money on social media.
Yeah.
On that. But UFC's, I get there are 2 things that went up. I get what UFC was trying to do with making, not having Condom Depot on somebody's butt. When they're trying to sell the company and get $300 million from ESPN. The implementation and how they went about it was horrendous.
It really was.
Even if you wanted to, like, when it happened, I was like, let's see how it pans out. About 3 weeks later, I was like, this is going to pan out horrible. Yeah. And, of course, Dana White, being Dana White, talks out his ass. I'm sorry, Dana, if you ever hear this. He talks out his ass, and he just made this out to seem so much better for the fighter than it actually was. Now, in society, things are changing where fighters can make money away from fight week. But again, how UFC did this without any input from the fighters was just another way that UFC comes across as bullying their fighters.
Yep.
Bellator not changing it, I don't know, they didn't change. They just kept the status quo. So yeah, good. I think that freedom is a big part of why a lot of fighters like Bellator over UFC as far as internally, because they're not constantly being told what to do.
Exactly, and we have, we saw this flow of fighters come to Bellator. Obviously Rory McDonald, Gegard Mousasi, Phil Davis, Ryan Bader, and now Leo Machida, all making their transition to Bellator. And when I looked at that, I was kind of thinking, well, why would these fighters want to go to Bellator? What are some of the reasons? Obviously, like you just said it, I think you hit the nail right in the head. It is the internal freedom and the internal given responsibility of the fighter to be their own boss with certain aspects of it, and they're not really micromanaged as if they would be in the UFC by Dana and the current WME team.
I mean, obviously nobody in Bellator is going to make Conor money. They're not going to make Khabib money. They're not going to make Nick Diaz money. They're not going to make John Jones money. There's no avenue for them to make that money. It would be ridiculous for Bellator to pay somebody $5 million. They're not going to get that money back. They tried pay-per-view and it did $95,000. It's not going to happen for them. The lower end fighters for UFC, and this I get a lot of pushback on. The lower end fighters now are on 12-12 contracts. It's 3 fights guaranteed. So if a fighter fights twice and wins once, he'll make $48,000 from fighting plus Reebok. That's not bad for a guy that's nowhere near the ranking. Where UFC, I really think, screws fighters are the journeymen and the guys in the middle that are the reason why the cards on Fight Pass can get $10 million per. Bellator pays those guys better in most cases. So a fighter like like Henderson. Okay, let's go with Benson.
Yep.
We knew he had his run at the top, and he was going to go back down to, let's say, 6 to 10 in the rankings in the UFC.
Right.
Bellator will treat him better because he's more important to Bellator than Benson was to UFC.
At that time.
At that time. Now, again, when these contracts come up, UFC could have kept Gegard. All they had to do was match Bellator's offer. They didn't. So Bellator got him. So Bellator, even the fighters that stay in UFC, Bellator is benefiting because UFC would have to pay that fighter more, so that fighter wouldn't go to Bellator.
Right.
So nobody left UFC that UFC wanted. If they wanted, they would have paid for them. Or they wanted enough, I should say.
So what do you think is happening with Eddie Alvarez? Because I know I have a huge amount of respect for Eddie Alvarez. The underground king, he truly is. This guy's been in the MMA game for so long. Former lightweight champion. Every time this guy's in the fight, it's entertaining. He's still a top 5 talent in the UFC's lightweight division, which, in my opinion, is the most stacked division currently in the UFC. I think he may be number 4 or 5 after that loss with Dustin, and then you have that potential match, or you compare with Kevin Lee. I wouldn't consider Eddie a journeyman by any sense. I think this guy could sell fights. I think this guy can put on fights, and I truly think he's one of those potential fighters that can sneak up to a potential title fight. But the UFC, it seems, aren't fighting for this fighter as hard as they should be. Can you explain that? Can you explain the mentality of the UFC?
We don't really know what's going on there, because the only thing we do know is Coker said he doesn't see them signing Eddie. Coker said his team, whatever that means, spoke to Eddie, and it ended off where it doesn't look like he's going to sign to them. Now, what that means, obviously we all know, money. So it depends what Eddie feels he's worth. I have heard absolutely nothing from anybody that I talked to about a price that Eddie told UFC and a price that UFC said back. Whether he gets it from European organization, Ryzen, ONE FC, I don't know, but there's nothing wrong with him taking 2 months to see what the best offer is.
That's true.
We don't know. WME again. They're not like where Lorenzo was different than Ari was. Ari is going to sit there and go, guy lost his last fight. The fight with Conor McGregor did $200,000 less, 200,000 less buys than Nate Diaz. Let me hit my calculator, or from this amount. I mean, he's not looking at what a good person Eddie Alvarez is to have in the UFC and why he might deserve getting that. The only MMA person involved in these decisions with UFC is Dana White. Everybody else, and obviously his matchmakers, but everybody else are just looking at Eddie Alvarez as he's fighter number 47.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. And we don't know where that's going to come and how it looks. And there's also another thing that fighters consider. Tom Lawler said this, Filthy Tom Lawler. He said he didn't take Bellator's offer when his last contract came up, which now we can laugh at because UFC fucked him royally, because he said he makes more money as a UFC fighter away from fighting, meaning seminars, appearances. And he said being brand UFC fighter Tom Lawler meant more money to him than Bellator fighter Tom Lawler. Hopefully that changes for fighters. But there's so many things in play. Would Eddie Alvarez be able to keep a sponsor that he has on Instagram if he's fighting for a company where less people are going to see him? All these things come into play. You get a fighter like Paige Van Zandt. Her Instagram posts are worth $10,000 per post to a sponsor.
Wow.
All of these things come into play.
Ridiculous.
The smart fighters brand themselves and understand. So they'll sit there and go, okay. So Eddie Alvarez ain't going to get that because, you know, he's not. At the last I seen, Eddie Alvarez didn't get implants. So
no, I can.
You know,
I can make sure that Eddie Alvarez does not look like Paige Van Zandt.
Yeah.
If he did, I would be on his Instagram page a lot more. I can guarantee you that.
Well, but Eddie, like, you have to look at things. Okay, I don't know how much Eddie does on social media with sponsors and promotions, but if he's going to go to Bellator and make half the amount of money he makes on Instagram, you have to always play that in. There's so many things that are in play when it comes to contracts right now. And the best part about that is it really is in the fighter's favor. Because Bellator now is more of a player than they were. Even though their popularity is lessened because of the ratings fall, the Zone giving them $33 million a year is the best thing that's ever happened to an MMA fighter whose contract's running up. Because now Coca can go to Viacom and say, I want to give this fighter an extra 50 grand. Well, we have 33 million. Go ahead.
It's breathing room. It's even beyond breathing. Yeah.
Now listen, I made a note here. We got off something that I wanted to bring up because the reason you had me on is numbers. We were mentioning about pay-per-view, how it's not as important.
Yes.
We got off that. Basically, just so people understand, and this goes out to all the people that say UFC's dying every time a pay-per-view does less than 200 million. Less than 200,000, I mean.
200 million. Whoa, man.
No, I wish. No, the reason I said 200 million is this. 200 million a year is about $48 million more than the Fertitta's biggest year.
Wow.
Pay-per-view is the icing on the cake. A Conor pay-per-view would probably put, with this past pay-per-view, probably put 65 million in UFC's pocket profit-wise.
Yeah.
50 to 65.
Huge.
Okay.
Huge. And that's just one pay-per-view.
Right. But if UFC stopped every pay-per-view, they'd still be a $200 million a year profit company. So
now, how does that work?
What do you mean? Why?
Yeah.
TV contracts, existing contracts, sponsorships. This is where WMA really stepped up. Where I'm not saying the Fertitta's lacked. They didn't. Fertitta's set up the company to be an ATM. WMA, I've just made it a bigger ATM.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I love that analogy, Frankie.
Oh, thanks. Contracted deals, and I mean ATM meaning automated teller machine. I don't mean the sexual version of it. Okay. Hold on. Let that air out a little bit, then we'll come back to it. Contractual deals make UFC about 70% of their money. Pay-per-view in 2018, before the Conor Khabib fight, might have been 20 to 25% of their revenue. Obviously, a fight this big might have jumped it past 30. So pay-per-view is not make or break. Here's what I don't understand, and you brought this up about how pay-per-view could be great if they do less pay-per-views. I can't find a single reason, and I talk to guys like Dave Meltzer. He can't figure out why they're still doing 12 pay-per-views in 2019. It makes no fucking sense.
Do they have any sort of obligation to do 12 pay-per-views with any sort of contract?
You are a brilliant person for saying that, because that's the only thing, and I meant what I said, that's the only thing anybody could think of, is that they were still contracted to certain cable providers to do 12.
Yeah,
but
that's the only way it can make sense to me.
Nobody can find out that info.
That must be some very classified, very kind of hush-hush type contract.
Most of the info comes out, and that's, you're actually just turning into something how UFC, if you want to get into it, how UFC numbers are known by people, including myself, when they're supposedly a company that doesn't release numbers. But I would think that we know by now. There's enough good financial reporters out there asking.
Right.
I don't get. I mean, there's no reason they should be doing more. They should be doing more than 6 to 8 pay-per-views a year. It makes no sense to me. Even things I disagree with WME doing, I can come up with a reason why in their mind they're doing it. 12 pay-per-views is ridiculous because when 10 of those pay-per-views make your company look less relevant, that's not helping.
No, and you can't really bank on those 1 or 2 pay-per-views to make up for the lack in those 10 to give you that profit that every company wants to do.
Here's the thing, they don't really have to make up because they're making money no matter what. But it's like when you see headlines about, let's say, 9 pay-per-views a year bombing, that's not good branding for your company.
Doesn't make you look good.
Right, and people see that, and they go, and then you get the casuals, oh, UFC ain't that popular anymore. I heard their last 5 pay-per-views bombed. You can't argue that point.
No, because that's only on the surface level, and then there's so much like we talked about with the streaming that goes within that and there's deeper than just a one headline from one article or whatever it may be. Now, Frankie, I want to kind of wrap this up, but I saved my favorite question for last, and so I want to ask you, are you ready for this one?
Go for it, brother.
All right, UFC and Bellator. I am an MMA junkie. I love mixed martial arts. I love these two organizations. I need to ask you, how financially healthy are both of these companies, and what is the main difference in terms of their future productivity
projections
with these
like
projections? Yes.
Because you were kind of like making up a word there.
I tried to, but you saved me. Thank you. I tried to do something with a P in there.
Productivities.
Productivity. And then Frankie, you know what you're talking about, so you saved me. This is why I have you on the show right here.
I didn't really save you because I pointed out the mistake and I passed on it. But I'll take you being that nice and generous. Here's the thing. Right now, Bellator's healthy because of the DAZN deal. UFC is ridiculously healthy. Last year, 2017, they made, we don't know the full figure, but the EBITDA was over, and that's getting into, that's a 3-hour conversation, over 300 million. So they made anywhere from about 275 to 310 million profit in 2017. In 2018, with this fight and the John Jones December fight in the books, they might get back to that. Okay, so they're healthy. They're healthy for the next 5 years, guaranteed. They're healthy enough to be a strong number 2, or even a weak number 2. Just a number 2 that we know that there's no reason they shouldn't show profit in 2019 because of the 33 million on the books. 2018, there's a DAZN deal kicked in late September, so that's basically 3 months. I don't know if that's going to help them break even or not. It might.
But it does, like we said, that 33 million, it does not harm Bellator in any way.
No, it was a lifesaver.
It's a lifesaver, yeah.
I mean, just think of it. A television network gave up their product to somebody else. That shows how important DAZN was.
Yep.
This should have been something Viacom kept for themselves. And it also shows that Viacom is now in the game. They're now in the game for the future of MMA.
Yeah, and they're all in the game too, should I say, right?
Yeah, and they might be all in until they sell it. Because some people are saying, well, they did that because they want to sell it. Well, guess what? If somebody's going to pay them 100 million for Bellator, and that's just a figure I'm making up, that person's an MMA fan. Probably. Or there's somebody who's going to see them as great business like how WMA did. Projections, you can't project, man. MMA is prize fighting. No matter what people want to think about MMA and say it's not, it's about honor, it's about, it's prize fighting when it comes to business. Prize fighting has peaks and values, peaks and valleys. I mean, very little values. We had who would have predicted 5 years ago that a skinny Irishman and a female would be the 2 biggest draws in UFC history? You wouldn't. We don't know. Now Khabib might be a superstar. We don't know. We don't know where the next guy is going to come from and how big they're going to be. We don't know. I mean, oh God, what? Aaron Pico. That guy. Aaron Pico. Could be
love Aaron Pico. I love some Aaron Pico, man. That kid is wild. That kid's talented. I mean, he's good looking. He's young. He's talented. He's good on interviews. He doesn't have Connor's personality, but he's very smart and he's very business savvy. If you ever spoke to him, so he has that going.
if he keeps going and beating everybody's ass, he could be Bellator's biggest draw they ever had, where they won't have to rely on bringing Wanderlei and Rampage back for the 8th fight.
Yeah, and then the question becomes if Aaron Pico stays, which I let's save that for a different conversation, because I love how you brought that in. The prize fighters of Bellator, and what is the likelihood of Bellator retaining these fighters. But Frankie, while you were talking, it made me think of something. So when Coker owned Strikeforce, and in my opinion, Strikeforce was I loved watching Strikeforce fights. Some of the biggest stars in UFC came from Strikeforce. Ronda Rousey, Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold, just to name a few. And we know what happened with the end of Strikeforce. Now, you said the only organization or person that would buy Bellator would have to be an MMA fan, or someone that could see some sort of level of profitability of a merger. Now, previously we said WME is not an MMA fan, and just by the numbers from this conversation, from what I understood, can WME see profitability by a potential purchase of Bellator in the future?
Of course, but I don't think they will, because of all the antitrust suits going against them.
Right.
I'm not saying that they're happy. Bellator seems to be making inroads, but the fact that there's a Bellator means UFC cannot be considered a monopoly.
Gotcha. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that they're doing things on purpose to help Bellator. Tinfoil hat people. I don't believe any of that. But they need to have a number 2. I don't think WME pays any attention to Bellator. I think Dana White does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think WME, I think you got to remember, WME, I had this conversation with somebody in the industry the other day about when Conor McGregor said he doesn't talk to Ari, he forgot Ari's partner's name, and he only talked to Ari once.
Yeah.
And they were like, how could they treat this star like that? Conor McGregor himself admitted all the things he didn't get. He didn't want to do advanced promotion, but he wanted to sell his liquor. So in order to promote his liquor, he had to come to New York in the middle of his training camp and do that press conference.
Yeah, he did.
He doesn't get treated like crap. He gets treated better than anybody. But it's a give and take. WME sees UFC as a ledger sheet and as a bottom line. That's been proven. So I don't think they're looking at Bellator as like competition. They're looking at how much money they're making with UFC. If they start losing money with UFC, they might start looking at Bellator if Bellator's making up that ground. But they're not losing money. They're making more money than the Fertittas ever did. If all of a sudden 2 years from now, Bellator is making making $200 million a year in revenue, and UFC drops down to $500 million, they're going to give a shit about Bellator.
Yeah,
Dana
I agree.
has to care day to day, because he's the one dealing with the fighters. He's the one dealing with the public perception. So I don't think Bellator's on Ari's mind at all right now.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, it's Ari, like I said, I don't think Ari knows that much about MMA. He wasn't at the Conor Khabib fight.
Which is startling to me when you said that. I couldn't believe that. But that just shows you how much of a numbers game this guy is. He doesn't really care for mixed martial arts. It doesn't matter who's headlining a card. He cares about, at the end of the night, how much did this thing sell and why did it sell so much.
You're somebody who's 4 years ago, I remember seeing tons of posts where people would say, damn, I wish Lorenzo would sell the company to somebody who treated it like a business instead of his own personal toy.
Yep.
He did.
Well, he did.
Now you know what it's like.
And this is it.
Yeah.
All right, Frankie, thank you, so much for coming onto the show. I greatly appreciate it. Your knowledge is just, I learned so much from you. I thank you for bouncing off my questions and teaching me a thing or two. I'm going to just say thank you to the fans for watching this. Make sure you guys comment, like, and subscribe. Post a question if you got one for Frankie. I know I'm going to bother this guy for any future questions that I have, Frankie. I hope you're prepared for that. And so I want to thank you guys for tuning in.
We can do another one when there's news that breaks or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always down for it. And congratulations on your success and the forward movement of your podcast, man. You put a lot of work into it. You don't like an idiot, which makes you better than half the MMA journalists out there. So
it's a grind.
Hey, but you're into doing it, and you don't have an attitude about it. So anytime you need some info, just hit me up, brother. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Frankie. All right, guys, thank you.
Peace out.
Yep. All right, thanks, Frankie. Have a good one, man.
Yeah.